I have always looked up to and revered the Pagani Zonda. It is a rather opaque market, but one thing that I will just open with is I have no vested interest in what I'm about to discuss because at this stage in the game, the prices of Pagani Zondas have put them out of the reach of all but the most wealthy collectors on planet Earth. They have become extraordinarily expensive. And I think that it's important to understand not just how we got here, but also why there's a cogent argument that they will continue to appreciate and be appreciated by the most well-heeled collectors on planet Earth. So the Zonda is a car that Pagani has finally stopped making. There are a very, very small number of cars to go around, but not such a small number that there isn't a degree of confidence in what someone's paying for a car. There is, in my humble opinion, there is such a thing as having too few cars produced to build confidence in the price of a car. Like, for example, McLaren F1. The McLaren F1 is a singular car. It is, in the opinion of many, the greatest driver's car of all time. But one of the things that I think continues to make the F1 so expensive is the fact that a collector of great means can have confidence knowing that while he or she is paying an exorbitant amount of money for this car, that one, there's a market if ever they want to pull a cord, and two, that they are not dramatically overpaying compared to the market value, to the actual market value of the car. It gives confidence in the market. And the Zonda has a number of layers to it that make it more difficult to decipher than the McLaren F1, but it has a number of things that I think make it worthy of discussion in terms of its future value and its future potential as another McLaren F1-esque focal point of a car collection. Let's just get some basics out of the way. A fair number of the cars remain controlled by Horatio Pagani. So, of the cars produced, there are a relatively small number of cars that actually can be acquired by a collector. We'll just start there. So, while you have less than 150 cars produced, at any given time, the number of cars that in theory could be purchased, I'm just talking cars that are in private owners' hands, you're talking less than 100. The actual number of cars that you can choose from to begin with is very small. And furthermore, you have a great degree of variety in terms of not just the way the car is produced, but the way that the car currently exists. You have the ability to send your C12S back to Pagani to be converted into a 760 with any number of trimmings, wings, etc. And the car comes out, and what's rather remarkable about that situation is that with other brands, with other cars, that kind of thing would usually be frowned upon, but in Pagani world, it's not. It's actually seen by many as a benefit. But what's interesting is the fact that Horatio Pagani is still so actively involved with the cars and so actively involved with the owners inherently creates confidence amongst the very, very well-heeled collectors in actually jumping in. Look, there are people who have sold more Zondas than I have, but my number is not zero. The observation that I've had certainly within the last year has been that you have an entirely new cohort of collectors who are entering the market on these cars. And they are guys who previously were buying things like McLaren F1s, 250 GTOs, etc., who are now training their sights on the Zonda, and with good reason. I would argue that amongst the 2000s era hypercars, that it is one of the most singular. It has an incredibly, incredibly strong appeal. I mean, I would say that the Bugatti Veyron is the most significant car of the 2000s. The Zonda and the Veyron are just completely different animals from one another. And the Zonda is just it is inherently a singular vehicle. There's nothing that existed of its era that was quite the same. The incredibly bespoke nature of the car, the interesting combination of extremely technologically forward, but yet still very simple is incredibly appealing. And just, yeah, the Horatio Pagani's status basically as an automotive artist lends incredible appeal to collectors. And as such, we have been witnessing the values of Zondas continuing to appreciate despite other cars slowing down, stagnating, or even retracting a little bit. The dynamic of Zonda ownership is no different than it is for McLaren F1 ownership, 250 GTO ownership, namely that there are special events that are just for owners of those cars. And now, with those cars being worth what they're worth, it firmly places you in a club of the most interesting people in the world. That is one of the single biggest driving forces of what makes a car continue to appreciate when it's already at a nosebleed level, is the ownership experience surrounding the car. And that is one thing that Pagani has done an excellent job of. And I think that's one thing that continues to drive those cars. And as more of the most interesting people in the world types buy those cars, it further drives interest, therefore appreciation of those cars. So I think that it's important to recognize the fact that transacting these cars is definite case of an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. And when you have someone who has that car as a general rule, they don't need the money. But if you have to have that specific car, and if you're talking about, and in Zonda world there are huge layers and huge levels to it. Regular C12S versus a very specific Cinque is going to be the price difference is going to be far more than 2x. In a scenario where someone wished to get, say, a very specific 760 or a Cinque, I mean, rumors I've heard of cars transacting between 15 and 20 million, I believe. And in order to get your hands on those cars, it's one of those situations. Again, it's unstoppable force, immovable object. You therefore have to throw an amount of money at it that shocks and awes, that just makes someone go, well, okay, fine. You have to have it that badly, then take it. And in order to do that, if you're talking about one of the highly coveted models, which again, let's take a step back. Every Zonda special, but there are certain examples that are more sought after than others and are more difficult to acquire than others. So if your objective is to get a very, very specific car, and one of the more or most coveted examples, then you need to shock a person who is, generally speaking, unfazed by money. And presumably the person with that car has also heard the same rumors that you have. So therefore, it's incumbent upon you to really reach deep. Scrounge around in every last cushion that you have in the sofas at your house. Get all the coins out and shock and awe with that offer. And again, if you're talking about one of the most desired examples, it might take over $20 million to get there. And who's to say that that even accomplishes it? In many cases, there are certain cars that there's just no money that can buy them. And Zondas are starting to enter into that realm. The biggest thing that I would say for prospective Zonda buyers is soul search, get ready, and cry once. It's like any of the truly greatest cars, I always say, cry once. Cry when you stroke that check. Because as a general rule, if you are buying the best, if you are buying something that is truly exceptional and unrepeatable, you cry when you stroke the check, but you tend not to cry after that.
This month of VINwiki Car Stories is brought to you by Bridgestone. We've talked a lot this year about the Potenza range of tires for sports cars and supercars, but what I'm personally most excited about right now is the Dueler AT Ascent. It is their latest and greatest tire for on-road and off-road capability. I've tried so many tires for my off-road kinds, but this really seems like it's going to be perfect. It's got full-depth interlocking 3D sipes and it is their latest and greatest product, so it should give me all the off-road capability and wet and snow and everything else that I want to put it through, as well as much better road manners. So check them out as well as the whole range of Bridgestone products to find out what's perfect for your ride at the link in the description below, and look forward to more amazing content on VINwiki from Bridgestone.